Mike Cohn, president of the Republican Club of Laguna Woods, and it's my privilege to read you an Americanism piece that was written by our Americanism chair, Karen Blanco. She was not able to be here today, but with our elections right around the corner and actually happening as we do this taping, I'd like to read you her American piece that she's so carefully and thoughtfully put together. 11 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence, after shedding precious blood to gain its freedom, our young country appeared close to collapse. America's first Constitution, called the Articles of Confederation, gave Congress power to make rules and to request money from the states. However, Congress had no enforcement powers, could neither regulate commerce nor print money. The entire U.S. Army contained only several hundred men and was very weak. The states bickered among themselves over war pensions, territory, trade, and taxation. In the fall of 1786, George Washington wrote to James Madison, "The superstructure we have been 7 years raising at the expense of so much blood and treasure must fall. We are fast verging to anarchy and confusion." Alexander Hamilton helped to convince Congress to convene state delegates once again, this time to revise the Articles of Confederation. The Constitutional Convention assembled in Philadelphia over the course of a sweltering hot summer from May 25th to September 17th in 1787 to hammer out a better government for our nation. Oh, to have been a fly on the wall of the Pennsylvania State House at that time. To begin the proceedings, the delegates shuttered the windows so that outsiders could not hear their debates, and they swore secrecy so that they could speak freely among themselves. Thus ensued 4 long hot summer months of arguments, debates, compromises, rewriting, and more compromises. It was a gathering of distinguished men who represented a cross-section of 18th century American leaders. Most of them were well-educated, active participants in their state governments, as well as in national affairs. Almost all of them had participated in the Revolution, and at least 23 had served in the Continental Army, most of them in command positions. Of the 39 signers of the Constitution, 6 men had signed the Declaration of Independence, and 5 had signed the Articles of Confederation. 22 signers were trained attorneys, and 11 individuals were businessmen, merchants, or shippers. 11 owned or managed large farms or plantations. A few of the men had been born into leading colonial families, while others were self-made men who rose from humble beginnings. They had diverse educational backgrounds. Benjamin Franklin received scant formal education and was largely self-taught. Conversely, about half of the men had attended college, and a few held advanced degrees. As a whole, they were relatively youthful. The average age was 45 years old. The youngest delegate was 26 years old, and Mr. Franklin was in his 80s. It would have been fabulous to observe these dedicated patriots work so diligently to craft the new and better government of the United States of America. Briefly, there were 3 main topics of heated debate. First, how should they construct the national legislature? Should representation be defined by a state's geography or its population? Clashes ensued between the more populous and less populous states about the best number of legislators to have. The second area of debate involved the role of the executive branch. Should the presidency be held by one man or divided among several different men? How long a term in office? How many terms allowed? The third thorny issue was slavery, which was dying out in the North but growing in the South. Should Congress ban slavery outright? It was agreed to table that volatile issue to a later date. Laboriously, energetically, point by detailed point, the delegates created the new Constitution, a feat that George Washington called little short of a miracle. One final committee condensed 23 articles into 7 in fewer than 3 days. The final version was complete and was voted on by the delegates. It was officially inscribed on parchment by Jacob Schallis, a professional engrosser or penman, who copied the document clearly and accurately in about 40 hours. He was paid $30 for his efforts. On September 17th, he was ready for the signing. On September 17th, it was ready for signing. 39 of the 42 men present signed the new U.S. Constitution. George Washington signed first as president of the convention, followed by each state delegation, descending from north to south. Several copies were printed, and it was published in newspapers for public review. The Constitution was then ratified by a series of state conventions held in 1787 and 1788. In conclusion, as Republicans, we are working enormously hard to elect Donald Trump in a couple weeks, a proven president who's committed to make America great again. He strives to preserve our great and special nation, created in part by our tremendous U.S. Constitution. Mr. Trump is a true patriot. Along those lines, in November 1789, 2 months after the signing of the Constitution, another great American patriot by the name of Benjamin Franklin wrote to a friend, "Our new Constitution is now established. Everything seems to promise it will be durable," Franklin continued. "But in this world, nothing is certain except death and taxes." As we all know, death and taxes are unavoidable, to be sure. But our job in this particular space of time in U.S. history is to fight as hard as we can, each in our own way, to defend and protect our precious Constitution. Let's continue to help each other to summon the energy, strength, and commitment needed to save our precious country now. Let's keep going. I thank Karen for her precious words. And may God bless America. Thank you. So now, again, welcome to you all. We're going to begin our program. I would like to introduce our esteemed speaker, the Honorable Barbara Stone, Dr. Barbara Stone. She's here. Thank you, Barbara, for coming. I'm going to read your bio with you, okay? Read bio. Many of you know Barbara. She's been coming to our club for many years. I don't know how many. Shirley would know. Maybe 20. She would come in January to kick off our year. Okay, we welcome Barbara back to give us excellent information and guidance on so many of the propositions that are on our November ballot. Barbara is a retired professor of political science and author who was on the faculty for 25 years at the California State Fullerton University. Her resume includes involvement in politics and civil affairs. She has served on the Board of Trustees of the Rio Hondo Community College for 12 years. She had the honor of being the Republican Woman of the Year. Yes, cheers for that. Barbara has received the American Association of University Women Distinguished Award, which is a big deal. They're all big deals. And Barbara served as the state's Little Hoover Commission for 6 years. Maybe she can tell us a little bit about that when she comes up. She has had great guest appearances on the John Phillips Show on 790 KBC, Monday to Friday from 12 to 3. Are you still doing that, Barbara? On radio? Okay, all right. So again, without further ado, I'd like to, by the way, Ro Kendall is not feeling well today, so I'm sorry Ro is not here. I'm taking her place this morning. So Barbara, welcome. And I have
I'm old. I don't know about all of you, but I'm old. The way I've always done things is the way I think things are going to keep going. I always speak after lunch, so I was priding myself on how early I was. Oh, well, sorry. So between Pat and Shirley, I've been here living on my phone, but are you? Ladies and gentlemen, it's a delight to be here. By the way, I waved this around so you can't hear me in back. Do something about it. Because believe me, I can project if I need to. But I have to know I need to. By the way, folks, when I say it's a pleasure to be here, it is. It's been a rough couple of years. My world has changed. You are the only club I am doing this for this year. Well, we had some major problems with my husband. He's at an institution in South County. No, I'm living in South County. Actually, right out of Glen, if any of you know the place. But so you're the only, I canceled everybody else, but you guys are now within reach, so. Thank you for the invite. Okay. I'm going to talk about the propositions probably relatively briefly on most of them, mostly because the vote seems fairly easy. On most. I have a couple of rules, and the only thing I recommend for everyone here is not that you vote the way I tell you to, but that you have your rules going in about how you're going to judge these topics. All right, I admit to a prejudice. If it comes from the legislature, it's probably lousy. So I can be convinced, but I have to be convinced. If a number of these, there'll be issues that you have firm views on, and so you vote yes or no. There's one on rent control, there's one on minimum wage. You should know how you feel about those and not have to think too much. There are also the ones where I have absolutely no idea what this is about. I am convinced, but you all can recheck this, that in that, do any of you remember when we got to vote on how to dispose of nuclear waste? And these experts over here said, this is the only way to go. And these experts over there said, this is the only way. How was I supposed to know? The liberal approach is that, well, maybe it's a good idea. The conservative approach is, you know what, I lived without this for a long time. I had no idea, I vote no. And that doesn't make someone right or wrong, it's just an approach. And there are a couple of those in here. Although sometimes you can go look at who's for and who's against. The problem with that is when you can't stand any of them. We'll get to that. Oh my dears. All right, that being said, let's start with Proposition 2. Tiniest bit of background. You do understand that during COVID, the state of California got lots and lots and lots of money. They were rolling in it. And they spent it. And they spent it on one-time things. Okay? Or just, who knows how they spent it. So they went from being just profligate to suddenly those guys don't have any money. And so you're going to see several of these things on the ballot that are what they are is the state borrowing money to do what the state should be doing, except the state already spent the money. Does that make some sense? And it's up to you whether you want to bail them out. Oh, your president points out that on your table, if you flip this, there's a list of the propositions that you can make. Yeah, that you can make those up. Good. Anyway, I have to look at it, but it's these paper bits and no. Weighing down both those. Okay. Okay, thank you. So, within this context, Prop 2 is a $10 billion bond issue. And it's for building infrastructure for schools and community colleges. Have I mentioned to you the state's growth? And actually, normally speaking, bonding is very expensive. If you get there by borrowing, you have to pay the money back plus interest. And interest rates are fairly high right now, by the way, including with the state and federal government. And I guess in my heart of hearts, I believe that this is something, some of it should be funded at the local level. And others of it, you guys, you shouldn't have spent all the money. So I'm just an old crank and I'm voting no.
Go on.
Well, and you have people running for school board that may have different opinions, maybe not. Try to pick that up. But you at least know what the issue is. This was not complicated. Oh, good heavens. The Proposition 3 is that you have a right to marry regardless of race or sex. Now, this is a tiny bit complicated. Because we actually, I believe, do have in our California state constitution a provision, do you remember voting for it, that marriage is between a man and a woman. In those days, we didn't worry about whether you had to actually be one or identify as one. That was the way it was. In terms of gay marriage, all right, the federal government has overridden that. All right, the right of gays and lesbians to marry is enshrined in federal law, and therefore it is the law of the state of California. The proponents of Prop 3 will go and we're just clearing the board there. There are two problems. By the way, one of which is it really was written with transgender couples in mind. And sometime we could talk about that. But more importantly, I see nothing here, although maybe I'm moralizing, that says how about polygamy? How about underage kids? Particularly that. How about all kinds of things these people aren't thinking about?
Animals.
Have I mentioned when in doubt I woke up? And I'm not very much in doubt, but you should at least be aware that that's what the discussion is. By the way, if any of you are in favor of this stuff about transgender kids, you don't tell the parents and you let the docs operate on the kids, shame on you. Anyway, okay, that makes me very grumpy. Prop 4 is, all right, you guys, I'm not going to spend any time on this $10 billion bond issue to respond to climate change. And actually, as far as I can tell, what this thing is money for either loans or grants to local governments, okay, Native Americans, non-profits, or businesses. There is a term for that. It's called boondoggle. And this is having the state borrow $10 billion, go into more debt in order to get some money to various interests they favor. This one, I can't even make a decent case for, so it's a bad idea. Prop 5 is the one that lowers the vote at the local level for increasing taxes for infrastructure, which, by the way, practically speaking, turns out to be anything. Currently, it's 2/3 vote. That vote is about property taxes. And I mean, as Republicans, normally speaking, would go, taxes, that's bad, we vote no, and that's easy. Let me point out to you where we're headed, because I guess I always want to come at you a bit about it's easy for us to know how we think we're going to vote, but there are a lot of other people you might talk to who don't see the world as easily. I don't know about all of you. I've even had some Democrats, foolish creatures, over time, ask me how to vote on these things, and their line is, in fact, there was one guy, he was great. Barbara, you know I don't agree with you on anything. But I know that you've done the work on these, so please tell me about them. All right? Just giving you the knee-jerk Republican answer doesn't get you anywhere. For that stuff, your goal should be to vote 10, 20, 30, 100 times by influencing other people. So I try to give you a little bit to look into things that might affect someone a little more complicated. At the local level, you run into a problem where it's a popular vote, but the only tax is imposed on the minority. And in this case, the minority are becoming, my dears, property owners. And so as you make it easy for a much smaller majority to tax someone else, in fact, you encourage more of that, and then you run into all other kinds of problems. If they want to do that with the sales tax, we can discuss it because that hits everybody. Doing it to the property tax that hits only a few, I think is really not particularly defensible. Unless your goal is to spend as much money as you can. Okay? So I think it's, for us, I think this one's an easy no. But, this is that. Top 6 in slavery. Don't give me looks like that. That's what they say. In fact, the whole thing says the argument for ends slavery. What the slavery is requiring prisoners to work. And their solution is to have more working with them to make them see the errors of their ways so when they get out they'll be productive.
Oh.
By the way, nobody filed a negative on this, which is kind of interesting. I will be honest, I believe work's good for everybody. Sitting around idly thinking of, I don't know, you made me mad, she really made me mad. Oh, she really mean to me. So how can I fix something to stick at her? Honestly, I believe all the way from my pet to the prisoners who aren't on death row, I believe that work is rehabilitation. Don't fool yourselves, they learn useful skills. They actually mostly don't. But just the idea that you get up, you go to work, you do whatever, that's a level of rehabilitation. That is not slavery. And therefore, I don't care that nobody's against this, I am. If that makes any sense. But you do understand, no one has to follow my reasoning, just have an understanding. All right, Prop 32 raises the minimum wage. Of course, the state's already done its thing on $20 an hour for fast food. If you're interested, it takes the current 16, raises it to 18, and then keeps increasing it. by a factor that's larger than the current factor. Every time you raise the minimum wage, you cause significant numbers of people at the lower economic levels to lose their jobs because they are not worth it. Seriously. Oh. They don't even argue that isn't true. And the minimum wage, as far as I can tell, most of the time is built on creating a base upon which people who make more money base their wages. And that's actually where the fish is coming from, as opposed from the poor people. Because I honestly don't understand why you cause people to lose their jobs. Two, you drive up the cost of the product coming from those people making minimum wage, which they have to go buy. So you lose some of their jobs, you drive up the cost of what they have to buy. And I don't approve of minimum wages, so I don't know easily. But that makes me hard. Actually, that's a lie. That means I actually try to think about the people they claim to be helping. I'm getting old and cranky. The property fee expands local government's power to impose rates. This is something all of them from Gavin Newsom on down are in favor of. Oh my God, people can't afford it. The current law is that rent control may not be imposed on residential units that were built after 1995, I think it is. So they want to make sure they can impose rent control on everything. You guys, unless somebody's subsidizing you, do you really want to go build housing that will be rent controlled as soon as you build it? Yeah.
Would that encourage more private owner building? Could it encourage more private ownership building?
Probably not. No, I don't know. He's asking about who would be encouraged or discouraged from more building, and the general belief in his mind that I might be wrong is that what it will do is, unless you're particularly a nonprofit being subsidized, you aren't going to build anything where they're doing that.
I have a friend that owns a and
I'll try to repeat it.
they put registers in Santa Monica, they put rent control on the
I can't hear
we have a practice of not raising the rent. They gave us a reason to raise the rent.
Yeah. I mean, it's the gentleman, and just because it seemed timely, and we thought, when a friend who had properties in Santa Monica, rental properties, he tried not to raise the rent because that wasn't fair. They came in with rent control. He was not an idiot. He raised it to the maximum every year because they were going to make it so good. It's called the law of unintended consequences. And I'm convinced those on the left absolutely don't care. They say they care about the poor and the this and the that. But shut up. Okay. We now hit Props 34 and 35. Which get off into areas I know very little about. I know enough to know that when you're getting into healthcare policy, particularly in this state, it's incredibly complicated. At Prop 34, I think I'm about to tell you the truth, but I only think. There's an organization organization called the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. It's a nonprofit. For reasons I have not bothered exploring, the AIDS Healthcare Foundation sponsored the rent control initiative that we were just talking about. Various interests, in this case, meaning the apartment owners. By the way, just as an aside, does everyone in this room understand that's where Howard Jarvis came from? They represent apartment owners. The apartment owners got very mad at the AIDS Foundation, who want to have rent control. So the story goes that apartment owners put Prop 34 on the ballot to get even with the AIDS Foundation. I could not believe it. Okay. And it has to do with money that comes in to healthcare organizations. And on the surface, this sounds quite reasonable. This is all about entities whose primary purpose is to provide health care for low-income people. That turns out to be a very small number of entities. And what it says is that they get prescription drug revenues from the federal discount on drugs, these entities. And that these entities, according to this, must spend 98% of the money on patient care. And if you read the promotion on this, it will tell you that means that the feds have a drug reimbursement program, the entities that provide health care to poor people get money from that, and that since it's that, they need to spend 98% of it on patients instead of stadium naming rights. Try to follow this. Clearly, what this is about is that the money has to go to the patients. It can't go to nonprofits that will do other things, like the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. You guys, if you're not following this, don't be embarrassed. The bottom line is this appears to be written specifically so whoever these organizations are can't give money to people like the AIDS Foundation, who will run around, I don't know, putting up signs on buses or something. Does that make some sense? No. No. But should I interpret this, if somebody bothers spending money to get this on the ballot, one of two things is happening. Either they profit or they're really mad at somebody else's profit. And I buy it. You guys, I suspect I would not approve of the AIDS Foundation. But I don't care. I'm not going to make decisions based on that. These things are foolish, and I'm voting no on this, and I'm voting no on that. No matter who's voting. Does that make any sense? But just understand, this is not a matter of great principle for getting into somebody's fight. Prop 35 is another one of these. Actually, this one's much easier. And for us, in terms of the vote, it has to do with, I really am going to get 5 votes. There is currently a tax on managed care organizations. And it gets into this complicated circle that I have great difficulty following. It has to do with prescription drug money. It has to do with federal reimbursement for prescription drug money. It goes to the managed care organizations, view that as being Kaiser. That money then comes back around, and the higher the tax, the more you get from the feds. But that tax, the tax is short-term, it's not permanent. And they will tell you on the surface, all 35 is doing is making that tax a managed care organization. I forgot to mention the money is used for Medi-Cal. It makes it permanent. Now, it does a couple of other things. Besides making it permanent, and there's this list of programs this money has to be spent on. It extends the tax, has these big penalties that they don't spend it the way they're supposed to. But it says, and the money from this tax must go here. In this case, I am inclined to believe the legislative analyst who works for the legislature. But generally speaking, their budget analysis of these things is pretty good. And they said this thing will cost the state billions. Because what's not on the list for this tax to be used are the sort of normal Medi-Cal things that come down. Medi-Cal, you know, is health insurance for the poor, which in our state, that's cheap. But we're going to have Medi-Cal, it's a joint federal-state program, and there are general things you do. You cover office visits, you cover things in hospitals. This says we have this tax, we're going to raise this tax, but Kaiser can't use it for those things. And Kaiser's not going to pay for it, the state of California is. So in fact, this is going to greatly increase spending on Medi-Cal, but it won't relieve the burden of the state. Does that make some sense? As far as I can tell, that's terrible budget. Really and truly don't do that. It's also supposed to, by the way, raise staff reimbursement for doctors. Any of you doctors who ever dealt with Medi-Cal patients? Yeah, because that Medi-Cal reimbursements are horrible. Half the physicians in California won't pay. But that's a different problem that you need to deal with. Anyway, I think 35 is just a real bad idea for me. And as I mentioned to you before, 34 and 35, you're into details of health care. I just don't know that much. Nor do I wish to know that much. 36 is easy. Jerry Brown lied to us. Back when Prop 47 was passed, I clearly remember the title, the advertising, the everything was that this will keep the worst criminals in prison. It didn't tell you I wasn't going to let everybody else out. As I assume you all know by now, Prop 36 seeks to reverse some of the damage done by Prop 47. It will let you take some felonies, and these are all about either drug possession or theft, and make that which was downgraded to a misdemeanor, upgraded to a felony. Interestingly enough, if I'm reading this correctly, it resurrects a version of 3 strikes. Because what it is, you have your one step, bad person. But then we catch you the 3rd time, honey, and it really is not a misdemeanor. It really is a felony. And that appears to be the way this works. I will admit, I'm so disgusted by what's happening. I you're gonna take somebody, we'll do this, we'll do that. Second time you come back, third time you're hopeless, I'm throwing you away. That seems to be planned. And this isn't that bad, but it's close. So 36, I think anyone should be embarrassed by 36, is a good idea. My last comment is going to be, do not think this will solve anything. In the name of what they refer to as criminal justice, they have polluted the entire system. So you have to have DAs that will prosecute. You have to have judges that will sentence. You frankly, in a lot of this state, have to have juries that will find people guilty.
Yes.
You have to, it's much more complicated than just this. But if you begin with this, many of our elected officials may suddenly discover, oh my goodness, the public's mad at me, and come around. It seems to be easy. Folks, I don't know, I might come back for longer than I meant to. I hope you at least get some idea what these are about. I really do. If it's easy to you to see how you should vote, do it. If it's worth the extra little bit of effort to understand at least a line or two about why somebody else should care,
That lady wants it over there.
and we'll go with that. Thank you just a minute. That's all I can say.
Okay, does anyone have any questions? I know, at one point, we researched this voter guide that we have on the table for you. We had Nancy Sandoval last month, who it's called Nancy's Picks. We went over her picks. I have another friend, Kathy Bittner. I went over Kathy's picks. They aligned up Nancy's picks. And Barbara, I used Barbara's picks. So these are recommendations. It's not written in stone. You have a free will. You can vote on however you discern when you do the research to vote on. But it's just a guide, a recommendation. So, someone? Yes.
Where are we on split tax rolls?
Where are we on split property tax rolls?
Yeah.
Is that your question?
Okay. We're trying to repeal, basically, start from one. Yeah. I'm done.
Yes, Joyce, you have a question?
Is how lucky we are to have. Let me tell you that in the good old days of Republican women, she came to slow. And it was when Schwarzenegger was running for office. All of us were thrilled with her. We were so happy. And she said, "You're gonna have a lot of problems." I don't know if she knows what she's talking about.
Joyce. Any other questions? Barbara, thank you so much. You are a legend. And we wish you the best.